Okay, wake up and smell the poison. I should very fleetingly introduce myself. I graduated from medical school back in 1982, that's 40 years ago, and I'd spent 6 years learning stuff. Some of it was useful, but not what I went to medical school to learn. I wanted to learn how to make sick people better, why they got sick in the first place, the causes of illness and preventive medicine. They didn't teach me that. Fast forward, I was very lucky to discover the British Society of Ecological Medicine. Note, they should have a stall here next year. The British Society of Ecological Medicine. And that was a bunch of doctors who were as disillusioned as I was with dishing out what I call the anti-drugs, anti-inflammatories, anti-epileptics, antibiotics, anti-everything. There was no sense of getting alongside the body as an ally, figuring out what the body needed, what was missing, and also what was in it that shouldn't be, which is the subject for today. So that is ecological medicine. And it's ecological in two senses. One, that it sees the whole body as one joined up ecosystem, right? So, if you've got a rash on your skin and problems with your lungs and painful joints, the NHS, God bless, will send you to three separate specialists. Ecological medicine says, look, this is all happening in one person's body, so there's got to be one underlying cause, or 10 underlying causes, but it's all one. More importantly, for today's topic, ecological medicine is ecological in that it sees the body within the wider ecosystem of planet Earth, which we live on and in, and we cannot separate ourselves from it. So in practice, ecological medicine means believing the patient, taking them seriously, putting the good stuff in, right? That's nutrition, you know about that, but we also need to know why the good stuff is missing in the first place, which is largely to do with modern agricultural practices, and taking the bad stuff out. So taking the bad stuff out is the topic for today, but it can't really be separated from putting the good stuff back in. In other words, nutrition and detoxification are part of the same package because, as we'll see, a lot of environmental toxins do their damage precisely by acting as anti-nutrients. They actually damage your nutrition, however well you're eating. Conversely, if you have really good levels of the right nutrients, you are more resistant to the toxins that are in your environment. You can actually keep them out rather better. Okay. Yes. So what makes the difference between health and illness? In the vast majority of cases, so for most of us, genetics only plays a tiny part. Obviously, there are exceptions. There are genetic diseases like cystic fibrosis. But for 99% of us, it's not about genetics. It's about factors that we can do something about. So that's the environment, which I'll mostly be talking about, but also our nutrition, exercise, sunlight, sleep, and having meaningful work and harmonious friendships and so on. So you know about all that stuff, but the environment is the bit we need to be talking about now. And it has changed out of all recognition. So for millions and millions of years of our time on this planet, we lived in a wild environment, basically. We picked our food or we captured it and ate it, and our bodies are adjusted to that. There's no way that in the 250 years since the Industrial Revolution, our bodies have been able to adapt to the toxins we're surrounded by. We still have Stone Age bodies, and some would argue even the 10,000 years of agriculture is a tiny, tiny fraction of time in the context of the whole evolutionary process, and that we're not even really adapted to farming as opposed to hunting and gathering. Some people's bodies adjust better than others, but none of us ultimately can be adapted to a toxic world. So, there are people with multiple chemical sensitivity who get dreadfully ill from one sniff of someone's perfume, and there are other people who can, smoke 60 a day for however many decades and appear fine. But the people who get very ill from chemicals in the environment are the canary people. They're the canary down the mine that show us where we're all headed if we don't clean up our act and therefore clean up our planet, because you can't poison the planet without poisoning the people. So primarily we're talking today about chemical pollution. It's in the soil from all the things that get sprayed on the soil, fertilizers, pesticides and so on. If it's in the soil, it's on your plate. You're eating it. Conversely, because of intensive farming that's drained so many of the nutrients out of the soil, if it's not in the soil, it's not on your plate. So, your portion of broccoli that 50 years ago would have given you enough magnesium for the day now isn't doing, because the fertilizers have made the plants grow so fast, without letting the fields lie fallow, without digging the stubble back into the fields and so on. They're extracting too much from the earth, and so our food is depleted of nutrients. Okay, pollution in the water. And we'll talk about what's in the water. But if you're just drinking what's coming out of your tap, particularly in London, you're drinking a lot of yucky stuff. So you do need to filter your water. And I believe there is a company right here who make good water filters called AquaTrue. So plug for AquaTrue. The most difficult one really is the pollution in the air. If you walked along the Euston Road this morning, you will know what I mean. And it's worse on weekdays. That's really bad for us. And it's actually quite hard to treat nutritionally. If you're breathing poison into your lungs, you've got a problem. So there's stuff we can do about it, but it's more collective than individual, unlike most of what we're talking about this weekend. And finally, the bit that people know least about, we are taking in toxins through our skin, partly if we're wearing clothes that are made from fabric that's either synthetic or it's been sprayed with insecticides. The cotton, as it's growing, is very heavily sprayed. And creams and perfumes and potions and moisturizers and all this stuff that, particularly women, we put on our skin. Those are petrochemicals, and they go straight in through the skin. Now, that's chemical pollution. There is also electromagnetic pollution. And unfortunately, I believe there is a talk on it, and it clashes with this one. There's a talk about EMFs. So we're not doing that here, but it's equally important. Right, what's the effect? Okay, this is the painful bit. When I left medical school 40 years ago, there was no such thing as a children's hospice. The concept was unthinkable. Now, there are children's hospices all over the world. In other words, children are getting cancer. Now, that is environmental. That is to do with the toxins, electromagnetic as well as chemical, that we're putting into the environment. And this is what medicine is not addressing. Medicine is looking at each individual person and saying, oh, you've got cancer X, right? The treatment for that is chemotherapy Y. This is what we'll do. But they're not looking at the bigger picture, which is 1 in 2 people are getting cancer. 3 million in this country have diabetes. 1 million have dementia. Heart disease is 1 in 3. This is crazy. And the thing is, what's really frightening to me is that it's becoming normalized. Right, so how do good, caring, compassionate people react to cancer? They run marathons and they raise money and they wear pink ribbons. It doesn't help. I mean, all honour to that compassion and that energy that people are putting into it. But what are they doing with all the money they're raising? They're giving it to the big cancer research institutions, which are basically supporting the drug companies to look for the elusive magic bullet. Right, we're not going to find cures for cancer, but given that we know the causes, we can prevent it. And I'm sorry to say, the reason that there is so little energy put into prevention is there's no profit in it for big pharma. And the fact of the matter is, chemotherapy is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And if we all, the whole population, learnt to do what people here this weekend are learning to do and keep ourselves healthy, they would go out of business. Cheers to that. Now, and that's why it's so difficult to get the word out there about preventive health, because there are very powerful forces who don't want us to know how to keep ourselves well. Now, what we're told, the official story, is that the increase in cancer is to do with ageing, an ageing population. That is not true, and I go into more detail in chapter 5 of my book about why it's not true. But the most powerful evidence is that cancer is rising fastest among children. So that's clearly nothing to do with ageing. The myth is that, we're living so much longer than the Victorians. Actually, our average age of death is indeed much higher, but that's because their average age of death included infant mortality, and 1/4 of people died before their 5th birthday. So that brought their average age of death down to the mid-40s. But actually, Plenty of people in Dickens' time lived well into their 90s, but they didn't get dementia. Okay, so Alzheimer's is pre-senile dementia. Okay, so it's got to be environmental, because if vast numbers more people in our generation have these diseases than had 2 generations ago, it cannot be genetic. I heard of a child only week before last diagnosed with cancer, and she was told it must be genetic, and nobody in her family history had that. Okay, so what do we need to know? We need to know what the toxins are, where they're coming from, how they're getting into us, and how to avoid them. Now, those 4 things together are how not to retox, because we know quite a bit about how to detox, but the problem is we then retox again because we're living in a poisoned world. So 1, 2, 3 and 4 are about how not to retox, and number 5 is how to actually detox. So we need to know what we're dealing with, and again, I've got a very short time. There is a lot more detail in chapter 7 of my book about what the toxins are, but essentially I've put them into 3 categories. The heavy metals, which includes very many, but those are the most important 5. Lead is becoming less important unless you're paint stripping a 100-year-old house. Cadmium is from cigarette smoking. Now, when you give up smoking, within 10 years, the tar is gone from your lungs, the nicotine is long gone from your bloodstream, but the cadmium is not gone. And it's a metal that's toxic to the bone and the brain, and we can remove it, but it's difficult. Mercury from fillings, from tuna fish, aluminium from vaccines, not the current batch, but most of the childhood ones. Also from wrapping food in aluminium foil. If you put lemon juice on, it'll leach out the aluminium. If you cook anything acidic like rhubarb or tomato in an aluminium saucepan. Nickel is in everything. Halogens, that's chlorine, bromine and fluoride. So those are elements. And then there's compounds, mostly petrochemical synthetic compounds. And we'll talk about them in a second, but just to go back to the heavy metals, one of the ways this ties in with nutrition is that many minerals and vitamins are needed by our enzymes, specifically by our detox enzymes, in order to work. But if you've got these heavy metals in there, they can push out the zinc or the magnesium that's sitting on a receptor on that detox enzyme, and therefore they won't work. So you've got a vicious circle. You can't detox because the toxin is stopping your detox enzyme from working. But good nutrition can overcome that. Okay, so let's talk about the synthetic compounds. They're making more and more and more of them. And what happens is there's a court case and it goes on for 10 years and they finally conclude that compound X is toxic, and the companies say, okay, we'll go away and make a less toxic version of it. And then 10 years later, that one's banned. So they keep going back and saying they're better, but they're not. Now, biocides, you may not have come across that word before, but it encompasses pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, insecticides. Right? The side, C-I-D-E bit, means to kill in Latin, and the bios is Greek for life. So biocides kill living things. And it's really important to get that these pesticides and so on were developed from nerve gases from both the First and Second World Wars. They're toxic to all living beings. We share most of our biochemistry with butterflies and oak trees. Right? So if it kills the bees, it's killing us as well. Plastics, perfumes, all of those things. Now, most of us, I think, are probably here are more aware of what's in our cupboards, but if you open your bathroom cabinet and you open your kitchen cupboard under the sink and you see what's in there, get your magnifying glass and read the ingredients list, because we're spraying stuff around our homes that is toxic. And also with soft furnishings, by law, they have to have fire retardants in. Now, those flame retardants are polybrominated biphenyls, right? Note the bromine in there. So they're outgassing all the time. So if you can, get second-hand, or if you've got a barn or something, let it outgas for a year before you bring it into your home. But only buy that stuff in the springtime, so you can have the windows open for at least 6 months. Okay. Now, all these petrochemicals are carcinogenic, and they're also, jump to the third point, teratogenic. That means they damage the fetus. Now, those two things are completely connected, because what they're doing is damaging your DNA. And if they damage your DNA, then they're going to mess with babies and they're going to cause cancer. They also mess with the hormone system, so they're endocrine disruptors, and they are neurotoxic. Okay, so where is all this stuff? Well, the outdoor air, it's car fumes. The indoor air, cheap furnishings, air freshener, all the domestic cleaning stuff. Water, right? Now, all the tap water has chlorine in. The water companies put chlorine in to kill the bugs. Okay, we do want some bacteria being removed from our water, but, they don't take it out again. And also, as well as removing the bacteria, what else do they remove? Nothing. So they don't remove heavy metals, they don't remove pesticide residues, they don't remove antibiotics. But why would there be antibiotics? Because everyone who's taking antibiotics is peeing them out, and that includes all the farm animals. If they're not organic, they're peeing out antibiotics onto the water table. Any drug that anyone is taking, human or animal, gets peed out onto the water table, and they found these drugs in the rivers and they're in our air. Okay. The government now wants to add fluoride to everybody's tap water. Fluoride lowers the IQ, it messes with the ovaries, the bone, the thyroid, the kidney, and most of all the brain. It's clauses 147 and 148 in the Health and Social Care Bill, and they've slipped it through under the completely nonsensical guise that it's good for children's teeth. What's good for children's teeth is to brush them and to not eat sugar. Okay, so going back to car fumes. The heartbreaking thing is that the vast majority of MPs who voted in favour of this really think they're doing it for the sake of children's teeth. But since when was Boris Johnson passionately concerned about children's dental health? It doesn't seem likely to me. So that's not what it's about. What it's about is this. Fluoride is a waste product of the phosphate fertiliser industry. And they have a waste disposal problem. And 30, 40 years ago, they were told you can't release this stuff from factory chimneys, it's too toxic. That's all turned around now. They've completely got the American Dental Association and now the British Dental Association in their pockets. They're clearly, in some sense, bribing them as a way of getting rid of their toxic fluoride and probably being paid for it. But it's interesting that in Europe, there's no fluoride in the tap water. And in Scandinavia, they've never had any. Always look and see what the Scandinavians are doing. Okay, so you've got to filter your water. Yeah, all of that, unfortunately, is in it. And food, right? If it's not organically grown, it's containing these biocides. And any animal that's not free range and organically reared contains those biocides and, unfortunately, antibiotics, and now, since we've left the EU, quite possibly synthetic hormones, because it's illegal in the EU to inject animals with hormones, but it's now not illegal here. And furthermore, we're importing more of our meat from America, where it's always been legal to put hormones in them. Okay, and you've got to count food additives in that as well. So you're already doing this stuff. You're already detoxing by eating organic, free-range, real food, and yeah. Eating organic, but also patronising regenerative farms. So there's a whole regenerative farming movement. And to be honest, what farmers do is going to have far more impact on our health in the future than what doctors do. Okay. Last year, 10 minutes, thank you. I was lucky enough to speak at the Regenerative Farming Conference called Groundswell, which is a very clever name, right? Groundswell Movement and the Groundswell. And these regenerative farmers are amazing. They're trying really hard to do organic, to be gentle with the soil, to do everything right in small scale. Their only obstacle is financial, because the government won't subsidise them. It's subsidising big ag, which is turning the whole countryside into a monocrop, flat field of oilseed rape. And, there's a direct line from that to overgrowth of fungal organisms in our gut. If we're eating stuff that comes from monocrop fields, we're going to have that same lack of biodiversity inside our own intestines. Okay, so I can't detox you. You can't detox you. The only thing that can detox you is your liver. That is one of its many jobs. Okay, so really, when we talk about detoxification, we have to remember we're not doing it and the magic medicines aren't doing it. The liver is doing it. All we're doing is trying to give the liver optimal conditions to get on with its job. Why have we got detox enzymes in the first place? Because nature wasn't anticipating, a world full of DDT. Well, we would have encountered certain poisons in the wild, poison ivy or stinging nettles or a snake bite or a spider bite, that sort of thing. But also, the liver detoxes our own hormones. So we produce testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, but once they've done their job, the liver deconstructs them, gets rid of the component parts and makes more as and when the body needs. And so we have got built-in detox systems, but yeah, they weren't anticipating car fumes and fluoride and petrochemicals. So, as I said, these detoxification enzymes, and they have two phases. If you want to know the biochemistry of it, you look up phase 1 and phase 2 detox. They basically try to transform a toxic substance into something else. But sometimes the something else is even worse than the original because the system was not designed for these kinds of toxins. But all the detoxification enzymes need the B vitamins, all the B vitamins, vitamin C, zinc, magnesium, and so on. These are the cofactors. And they sit on a little receptor site on that enzyme and do their job. And they can be displaced by the toxic metals. Okay, these are the main 8 detox methods that I use. And they are all detailed in chapter 7 of my book. And there are others. Fasting, many people use. I don't get too hungry. Okay, so vegetable juicing is number 1, and not fruit. Too much of a sugar here. Eat fruit by all means, but don't juice it because you're getting, more sugar in that drink than our hunter-gatherer ancestors would have got in a year of foraging. You don't want to juice pesticides, so make it organic. And juice, not smoothie. Smoothie's okay, but what we're doing with juicing is extracting the phytonutrients, the magic chemicals, some of which I think we haven't even discovered yet, which are in green vegetables. Mostly green. There's a list of veg you can use in chapter 7 of my book. You're using it as medicine and you're getting more of an antioxidant hit from that fresh green vegetable juice than I think any pill or supplement can give you. Okay. Saunas is the other number 1 thing. There are some people who can't do hot saunas because they just can't bear it. But in that case, you can use a far infrared sauna, which is slower and subtler. But what sweating does is these petrochemicals, which are 90% of the toxins we're exposed to, it's really important to understand they are lipophilic, right? That means they're fat soluble, they're attracted to fat. And there is a layer of fat under the skin. And when you're in the sauna, for the first 5 or 10 minutes of sweating, they will come out. But the body doesn't know what you're doing. It will just reabsorb them again. So you go into the sauna with a dry towel, you wipe the sweat off, you wipe it off, and you wipe it off. You only need 5 or 10 minutes because anything that needs to come out will have come out in that time. It's not good to stay in any longer. And you must rehydrate. And in fact, Body Bio, I think, do something called E-Lite, L-Y-T-E, which is a replacement of all the minerals, because you will lose the good minerals by sweating as well. So you need to replace them as well as the water. Epsom Salt baths is a very, very old method, but there's plenty of modern research showing what it does. Professor Rosemary Waring from Birmingham University used it with the autistic kids, and not only did they calm down, their mums who got in the bath with them found their arthritic joints were much, much less painful. And the red blood cell magnesium level went up. So it really does go in through the skin. The magnesium relaxes the muscles, the sulfate helps with estrogen detox, and it calms down the autistic and ADHD kids, of whom there are vastly, vastly more than there were 2 generations ago, for reasons that I'm sure you understand, however unfashionable it is to say so. Right, I'm a fan of Colonics. I think, in the right hands, it's a really good method for some of the people, some of the time, not for anybody under 18. What you're doing is you're indirectly doing a liver cleanse. I'm not fond of people drinking a gallon of olive oil and a gallon of lemon juice, because the gallstones that appear to come out when you analyse them are just made of lemon juice and olive oil. But what you're doing this way is you're cleansing the colon, and most of the liver's blood supply comes from the gut. A lot of it comes from the colon. And so the liver is getting a much purer blood supply. So you're increasing its capacity to detox whatever it needs to detox. And it's waking up the bowel from inside, it's giving it a massage. And also you can put in probiotics and antifungal herbs and oxygen and all the good things the colon needs, which are much less effective if you take them orally. So a good colonic hydrotherapist will do probiotics and so on by the rectal route. Okay, now if you can test and you can find out what toxins you've got, you can tailor your own supplements accordingly. So if you've got aluminium poisoning, or if your kids have, and if your kids have had any of the childhood vaccines, they have got aluminium in their system, silica is the best for getting it out. I use silicon organique, the liquid form without preservative, from LLRG5, who are a French company based in Ireland. And silica really does pull aluminium out of the body. The researcher to look up about this is Professor Chris Exley. Anybody know about Professor Chris Exley? Brilliant researcher, 35 years studying the biochemistry of aluminium. And guess what? His office got raided. He got sacked from the University of Kiel because he was just too clever, and because aluminium is a huge, massive industry like big oil and big pharma. But he tells the truth. Okay, zinc detoxes copper, but why might you have too much copper in your system? If you're a woman and you've been on the pill, or if you've had a coil, either a copper coil or a hormone-releasing coil, you will have too much copper in your system. So zinc will get rid of the copper. There's loads of things that remove mercury, but you have to remove the source. And we say in ecological medicine, put the good stuff in before you take the bad stuff out. So despite what it says there, before you have your amalgam metal fillings safely removed by a specialist dentist, absolutely crucial that it's a specialist dentist, a member of the IAOMT, International Academy for Oral Medicine and Toxicology. They've got protocols which make sure that in removing the fillings you don't release more mercury into the system, because that will happen if your high street dentist does it. And there's at least one holistic dentist here. In fact, there are two. Okay, so you do make sure that you are topped up with zinc and vitamin C and selenium and all the good minerals that you need first. Then you have the fillings safely removed, and then you detox the mercury that's left in your body with all of these and more. High dose vitamin C, selenium, zinc. PC is phosphatidylcholine, and it's a phospholipid, and nobody has paid me to say this, but the Body Bio version is the best. It's also the most expensive, but it is way, way better. Phosphatidylcholine will detox everything, and we'll see in a minute that it's particularly useful for detoxing the fat-soluble petrochemicals. Really, there's only two things that get them completely out of the body: saunas and phosphatidylcholine. So PC, chlorella and cilantro. Cilantro is coriander. You have to be careful. The reason coriander works to get mercury out is because it grabs onto it. But it will grab onto it anywhere, including when it's growing in the soil. So it has to be organic, because if your corianders come from polluted soil, it's picked up the toxic metals from there as well, and it'll just release them in your system. So organic cilantro, organically produced chlorella. Okay, for nickel, people know about vitamin C and zinc, but methionine is an amino acid that will actually chelate it and take it out of the body. If you just look up from any search engine environmental sources of nickel, you'll see there are about 20 common ones. To get chlorine or bromine or fluorine out, you need iodine. We don't take enough iodine. Okay, really important nutrient. No time to go into it further, but I have a little rant about iodine, I think, in the spring chapter of my book, because there's a chapter for each season. Okay. For detoxing anything, you need vitamin C, all of the B vitamins, often in the methyl form, zinc, magnesium, glutathione, and PC. Glutathione is 3 amino acids strung together. We should all be able to make it from protein foods, so the vegans struggle. But genetically, we're all different. Some of us, even if we eat plenty of animal protein, don't produce enough glutathione. So it's a very, very useful supplement. PC, I've already talked about. Lead hangs out in the bones. It's very hard to get rid of it. But it needs calcium, vitamin C, zinc, and PC again. But before you give anybody calcium, which I virtually never ever do, you must get the magnesium level tip-top. Okay. High-dose vitamin C. You're using it as a medicine, not a supplement. You want ascorbate And I describe, it's on page 305 of the book, how to build up your dose very, very slowly to your personal maximum for bowel tolerance. And it gets rid of more or less anything, but you don't need to do it indefinitely. Sprouting, this is great for nutrition, but it's also a detox method. And what you do is you soak the seeds in water, but in that water that you soak them with, add a little bit of liquid zinc or selenium or whatever you want, and then you water the seeds with that water as well. The plants will absorb the minerals for you, and you will then, when you eat the seedlings, be getting those minerals in a much more natural and absorbable form than if you simply took the supplement direct from the bottle. Okay, finally, this is a very, very useful herb. It's traditional herbal medicine, but there's now loads of scientific papers showing that milk thistle actually makes an enormous difference. The liver likes it and it helps it do its job. Okay, so the book's not just about toxicity, it's about lots of other things as well. I will be signing it afterwards if there are any copies left, because they'd sold quite a lot by the end of the morning. Questions? Go ahead. Oh yes, wait for the roving mic, thank you.
Thank you. I was under the impression that the bioavailability of glutathione supplements is quite poor. So is there, what's your thoughts on that?
Yes, we have heard this, that if you take glutathione orally, it kind of doesn't work and you have to take it intravenously. And certainly I have colleagues that give it intravenously. But what I have found in practice, giving people glutathione, is that the blood level of glutathione does go up, and it goes up within 3 months. Theoretically, it shouldn't, because it's just 3 amino acids and they're broken down into their constituent parts and reabsorbed, and you've just got the amino acids you would get from protein anyway. I have to tell you, my theory about why it does work is that we've all got some degree of leaky gut, and therefore the 3 amino acid molecule that is glutathione is getting absorbed whole, although ideally it shouldn't be.
I had a very similar question. I heard that the half-life of glutathione, even IV, is only about 2 minutes, but maybe you already gave the answer that it's the amino acids that then can travel and glutathione can be reassembled. Yes. But do you know whether it's as effective to just use the 3 amino acids? I think glycine, glutamine, and NAC, right?
It should be. Theoretically, it should be.
Should be, but is it what you see as well?
Well, I just use glutathione orally because I have found in practice that it works. But
better.
I also, convert people from vegan to paleo, and that gives them more glutathione as well.
All right, thank you.
Okay, there's a question down here.
Jenny, how can we do a self...
Hang on, can you wait for the...
Oh, yeah, I'm loud enough anyway. Sorry, I was trying to shout. How can we get a start state, DIY sort of home test to see our measurements?
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
So you can measure your mineral levels and your toxin levels through Biolab and through Microtrace Minerals in Germany, or through TDL in central London. There's plenty of labs. Yeah.
What do you think of nutrients taking them in by IVs? High doses of vitamin C.
Yeah, I think it depends on the patient. I mean, basically, I don't do IVs myself, but I have referred many patients for IV, but only when they're pretty ill, actually. For severe chronic fatigue, for severe toxicity, I tell you what I do always send people for IV is cadmium toxicity, because you can't get cadmium out just with oral supplementation. You need high dose vitamin C orally. So some people need it some of the time. There was a question over here.
Just a quick one here.
Okay.
Long story short, but my health, I'm being investigated as a lab rat, endocrine issues. So I've done lots of this, but any more advice, the home stuff, so I'm buying homemade soap and things. I'm astonished at what's in the environment. Yeah. But at cleaning, a lot of the cleaning products, even the probiotic stuff, I find doesn't last. So then the water goes mouldy, and then I'm thinking, I'm now spraying the whole house with mould and everything else. So what's your advice is it better to make these products yourself, or is there brands you recommend?
There's some advice in chapter 2 of my book, the spring chapter, because it's spring clean your gut, not your house. But there's a book called Cleaning Yourself to Death by Pat Thomas, and she gives loads of recipes for alternative cleaning products. But you don't need to use lots of water in cleaning. You just need a damp cloth well wrung out and plenty of ventilation. If you want really sparkling windows, you can use vinegar if you don't mind your house smelling like a fish and chip shop. Yeah, absolutely. You know, we don't want to kill all the bacteria. They're our friends. People are going to be dying of hand sanitizer poisoning. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Hopefully speaking on behalf of everybody, thank you. But is there a protocol you could suggest for sauna? So pre, during and post.
Pre, during and post what?
Sauna. Infrared saunas.
Pre, okay.
So what to do before,
yeah.
During and after?
So obviously it depends on what issue you're treating. I don't think it matters if you take the electrolytes before or after. After maybe make more sense. But that's it. You go in, and if you're going to swim and stuff, you do that first. You stay 5 or 10 minutes, you keep toweling off the sweat, and then you drop the towel in the dirty laundry, and then you have a shower. And that's it. That is it. It's really simple. You don't need to spend a long time in there. Yeah?
Hi, and thank you again. Yeah, it's been brilliant. I just wanted to ask a question about non-organic food, because obviously not everybody has access or potentially the income to always buy it, at least. So if you are going to buy fruit and vegetables that are non-organic, to get rid of these biocides, what would you suggest?
I'm afraid I don't think you can, because they're not just sprayed on the surface, they're in the soil and taken up by the roots. This is a very important question. People say not everyone can afford organic. First of all, in 1956, we spent 33% of our income on food. It's now down to 8%. We expect cheap food, and that means nasty battery chicken and crappy carrots. So I think we have to reprioritise. Second thing, for example, with chicken, it's not more expensive to eat organic chicken if you eat it twice a week, as opposed to the battery chicken you were eating 5 or 6 times a week. So you can eat less and make it organic. And thirdly, this, like air pollution, it's a campaigning issue. It's not a totally ecological issue. We need to be writing to our MPs and saying, can you please subsidise the organic farmers? You know, as with air pollution, there's wonderful charities. There's Client Earth, there's Mums for Lungs. We need to get involved in a campaigning sense, because you can't hack your body when you're breathing crappy air or you're eating crappy vegetables. I have had people sit in my consulting room and say, well, I'm sorry, I can't afford to eat organic. Oh, by the way, I need to reschedule the next appointment because we're going to Barbados.
Okay, I have a quick question just about the Epsom Salt bath. Mm-hmm. How much Epsom salt should you put in the bath when you're doing
More
that?
than you think. About 400 grams in a whole bath, and don't have it too hot, and do it last thing at night. Yeah, the recipe is in chapter 7 of the book.
If you're not using filtered water,
You've got to be using filtered water. Cancel your next holiday and buy a water filter, and a whole house water filter, so you're not bathing in it.
Hi, yeah, my question's about vitamin C. So you're talking about high dose vitamin C.
Yeah.
So if someone's taking liposomal vitamin C, you don't need as much of high dose vitamin C, or do you?
This is debatable, to be honest. I'll tell you why I don't use liposomal vitamin C. Because in nature, vitamin C, like the B vitamins, is water soluble. It's meant to be a water soluble vitamin, and you need a lot of it frequently, little and often. Like when we were grazing and gathering in hunter-gatherer days, you'd have your berries, you've had your roots and shoots and nuts, whatever. Your B and C vitamins are water soluble. The fat soluble vitamins are vitamins A, D, E and K. And I don't think we need fat soluble or vitamin C in a bubble of fat. I think we just need to take it little and often. So you make a whole big glass bottle up full of filtered water with your scoops of vitamin C powder in it, shake it up, carry it around with you, and you swig it throughout the day. That way you keep up the level. One more question, I'm told. Go ahead.
Hello. In terms of getting the PC, would taking sunflower lecithin be a good option?
It's a cheaper
the
option.
organic one, yeah.
It's a cheaper option, and I'm sure it does some good. But my experience clinically is it's not quite as good. If you have more questions and haven't had time to ask them, catch me at Watkins' book signing stall, which is where I'm heading now.